Good evening. Message to all CHASA members. I'm speaking to you from Uzbekistan, where I'm attending the CITES Conference of the Parties, Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species, but speaking to you today about firearm affairs. So this may be of interest to hunters and firearm owners alike. As CEO of CHASA, Stephen Palos, I know there's been a lot in the media lately around new firearm legislation that seems to be doing the rounds, draft legislation that is draconian in nature and is very much not an improvement on the previous iteration that we saw in the early 2020s, in 2021 or so. And I just want to bring everybody up to speed as to where CHASA sits on this. The first and most important thing to understand is that at the time of the last gazetting of draft legislation, and that time it was in the time of Minister Becky Chelly, you will recall it was the legislation that, for argument's sake, took away self-defense as a means, Section 13, as a means to own firearms, radically reduced the rights of reloading, and all sorts of other crazy things that just would not work for hunters and firearm owners in general, sport shooters as well. At the time, we took a few steps as CHASA, and the first and most important one is that in partnership with the South African Arms and Ammunition Dealers Association, we invested in top-notch advice from a senior advocate, a constitutional law expert, expert on how the law drafting process works in South Africa. Very expensive. I can reveal that it was well over 300,000 Rand spent on that opinion. We got an 80-page opinion from that advocate after some weeks of him working on it for us, and it gave us the roadmap of how to deal with any kind of legislation that is problematic for us. Very valuable, obviously, for the Firearms Control Act amendments that may come one day, and in fact on any other kind of legislation, even in the hunting space or whatever. So it's been very valuable money spent. And the fact of the matter is we are still in a position to apply that advice going forward now. The other part of the news from that time is there are a few other things that CHASA did, again in conjunction with partners like the SA Arms and Ammunition Dealers Association. At the time, we launched a court action to get an extension on the comment period that was in the Gazette. And in that regard, the minister relented straight away. The matter didn't have to go to court. The comment period was indeed extended at the time. Other parties and other organizations also did similar types of things, but that was our action at the time. But another thing we did at the time was we had a meeting with the now late Tina Jomet Peterson, who was at that stage the chair lady of the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee for Police. And in that private meeting with her, we went down, obviously under, again, the partnership between us and the dealers, and in the company of our firearms legal advisor, Martin Hood, of course. We convinced her that there were huge flaws in the stakeholder engagements that the Secretary of Police had done in drafting that legislation. And that actually ultimately resulted in that piece of draft legislation being sent back to the drawing board, back at the Secretary, and a process of some engagement with stakeholders started under the then Secretary of Police. But that's some years ago now, and since then it went quiet until this new news broke of, again, draconian draft legislation doing the rounds. This time it popped out that they had sent it to NEDLAC, which didn't make too much sense for most of us, why NEDLAC would have to get a bite at that, but any which way, that's where it came out from, that it became exposed that it exists. And the current scenario is that NEDLAC want to now engage with the stakeholders. We don't really mind engaging with anybody from an advocacy and lobbying perspective. If NEDLAC want to talk to us, we don't really see a reason why we should not go and state our very good case with NEDLAC. But be that as it may, we are nowhere near any form of draft legislation being a problem yet. So we've been watching this thing very closely for years. We will continue to watch it. If something happens, all of a sudden, let's say another draft legislation gets gazetted for the purpose of stakeholder and public input, we'll obviously do our input at that stage. It will in any case have to end up at the Parliamentary Portfolio Committee. They will in any case have to go through their processes of stakeholder engagements, where we will once again have a bite at the apple in that environment. So there's going to be lots that would happen before this thing gets before Parliament for final voting. And knowing the hot potato that it is, it's neither here nor there whether it could pass. It was not progressing very well when a single party, the ANC, dominated politics in South Africa. We have to look at the political environment that has changed radically now with coalition politics in place in the GNU. And odds are obviously that if it gets into the parliamentary process, it's going to be quite a long and hard fight. We will be there every step of the way. We know what we have to do. We also know from our legal opinion when we can do anything more robust. And in a way, that's rather fortunate that there's no legal actions open to us at this stage. There's only stakeholder engagement action in the short term. The legal processes will come only when there's some form of promulgation of legislation. And that's going to certainly be some time away in any case. Best advice to everybody is to relax, do your shooting, do your hunting, keep your firearms, stay compliant. One of the things you can do back home at your home association, your CHASA affiliated association, you start maybe encouraging your excos there to put a little bit of money aside and build yourselves a legal fund. A legal fund will always be useful should we come a year down or 2 years down the line to have to launch an action. And if we come back as CHASA to say, right, we've got an action that's coming up now, and your association is already sitting with its legal fund, then they can choose that the case is a good case and they can put the money into that. Always good to have cash because that's what it takes to win court cases. But there's not going to be anything imminent in that regard. You're looking a year or more away from anything like that, probably even longer. So for now, don't panic, but do watch, do listen, do be aware, stay compliant, do your renewals on time, and keep on shooting, keep on hunting. Thank you.